Welcome to De-Stress 302. I'm your host, Alena, and today we're here with
Governor Matt Meyer. Happy to be here in the Cause Theater, Alena.
All right. Governor Meyer, your background spans education, diplomacy, and entrepreneurship. What personal experiences in your journey first made you aware of mental health and its importance to you?
Well, one thing that happens when you move from place to place, from job to job, from school to school, is you're surrounded by a lot of different people with a lot of different interests, some good, maybe some not so good. So I think I learned pretty young into adulthood that I had to figure out who I was. You got to be careful in life that you're surrounded by people who sometimes will lead you in a direction that's not so good for you. So I learned to do a few things, to look myself in the mirror and don't let others control who I am. And that includes friends, close friends. That includes cousins, even parents who want and wanted my life to go in a certain direction and for me to do certain things. But ultimately, I found for my own mental health, I had to be able to look in the mirror and be happy with who I was.
What inspired you to make mental health a focus during your time as a governor specifically?
Look, I think we're in a really interesting time for our country. Your grandparents and great-grandparents, Alena, and my great-grandparents and great-grandparents didn't have these things that they could take out of their pocket to interact with people. There are some amazing things you can do with these things that we hold in the palm of our hands and in our pockets, but there are some pretty destructive things too. And I think one of the destructive things is that there's an epidemic of loneliness, I think, actually, not just in our country, but in our community, across Delaware and various communities where people feel very alone. I think it's something that's true among many children, but it's also true among many adults, that because people interact so much digitally, they're interacting a lot less interpersonally. And if I am to lead this state forward, I think of all the problems that we encounter and deal with, that's one that's really, really important, that we make sure that our community comes together and says, yes, there are these digital tools. Yes, there are these new ways to interact and engage with each other, but there are risks to those things. And we have to make sure that we're addressing the interpersonal needs, the social, the emotional needs of every Delawarean.
Would you like to tell us about the mental health initiative that you made just this morning?
Sure. You know, as I said, the personal wellness and mental health is among the most important challenges we have in our state. It's something faced by communities across our state, by families and individuals across our state. We want to make sure we're providing as many supports as possible. Alena, you, like me, I presume, in your elementary school, your middle school, your high school here in Delaware, you had a nurse's office. If you had something physically wrong with you, you had a place to go in school. It's really important to me and to Delaware's future that we have wellness centers, that we have places for mental and emotional health in schools. This year, the state is investing a historic amount, $8.4 million, to increase mental health supports within elementary, middle, and high schools. If students are struggling with their mental health and not receiving adequate support, it's harder for them to focus on their schoolwork. It's harder for them to be productive members of our community. I think it's well worth public investment that we invest in that. But also, maybe most importantly, if you're watching this and you feel like you're struggling with mental health, if you're watching this and you have a friend or family member who's not getting the help and support they need with their mental health crisis, please reach out to my office or reach out to services that are available in communities across this state. There is help available for you, and we're not just saying that, we're backing it up with millions of dollars of taxpayers' money to make sure we support those who have mental health and emotional needs that are not being addressed today.
Yeah, that's really good. As a male leader in public service, what mental health pressures or stigmas have you faced, and how do you navigate them?
Well, I mean, there are all sorts of mental health pressures generally for men in today's society. And then there's some additional mental health pressures when you're the governor of a state. With respect to Delawareans generally, I think it's a time when people are getting squeezed in a lot of ways. There's tremendous pressure, both among kids. We talk about a lot among kids that everybody you see online in ads looks beautiful, is beautiful, everything's great. They're driving a great car. They have a beautiful house. And a lot of us don't live that way. That's true of kids, but can I tell you a secret, Alena? Mm-hmm. That's also true of a lot of adults. And a lot of adults feel like, wait a second, am I adequate? Am I doing what I should be doing? Because what I'm seeing on this screen does not represent what I've been able to get. And that's certainly true of governors as well, where you're like, wait a second, this is the box I should be fitting in. And I've learned in life that don't try to fit yourself within a box. I try to look in the mirror. I try to take a walk around the block once a week, think about who I am, think about what this state needs, think about what are the issues we need to address, and then spend the rest of the time really working to address those things.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned wanting to spotlight men's mental health, which is often overlooked and can be sort of a taboo topic. How can we start shifting that narrative in Delaware and beyond?
Well, it's an interesting time where part of it is women, and there's data that supports this, Alena. Women, not just in Delaware, but across the country and in many parts of the world as well. Women are doing incredible things they haven't had opportunities to do before. Like today, in a two-parent family where you have a mother and a father, there are many homes in Delaware where the mother makes enough money to provide for the family, is the primary caregiver for the child and for her husband, and is available round the clock for various mom duties that fall through the gap. That obviously, in many cases, creates a mental health crisis for women, for mothers, but it also creates mental health crisis for men who are like, what am I doing? There's a record number of unemployed and underemployed men, adult men, in America today. And so we need to recognize that this is an issue. There's sort of the family structure of 30, 40, 50 years ago has fundamentally changed in America. And I'm not saying that we should go back to the way it was. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we need to be open and honest and have conversations. Each relationship and each individual finds their own personal happy place. They find their own center. And I think it starts with us saying that sort of this traditional model of who everyone needs to be, we need to dispose of that and make sure that people look to themselves and their partners or their network or their families or friends to help support them in identifying and becoming who they really are.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us more about the effort to create an Office of Suicide Prevention?
Absolutely. The death by firearm, right, is one of the leading causes of death in our country. And death by suicide is the leading cause of death by firearm, which is incredible when you stop and think about it. It's individuals who, in this incredible, prosperous society, like we're in America, you can do incredible things. There were times in history, historically, for human beings, where getting basic food, where heating your house, where having air conditioning was just about impossible. Getting electricity or clean running water in your home we have all these things now. And in spite of having all these things, there are individuals making decisions to end their own life. We need to address this as a public health crisis, an urgent public health crisis. I don't want the Office of Suicide Prevention to be in some office of government that I never come into contact with. I want it to be in my office. Representative Eric Morrison, who's a state representative, did incredible work leading the way on a bill to establish this office. I am strongly supportive of standing up this office to make sure that those people who are encountering mental health challenges that eventually could lead to suicide. We get them the supports that they need when they need them. It's very hard, Alena, when you think about health issues, right? Mm-hmm. If I had a cut on my hand, everybody could look at it and say, oh, this guy has a cut on his hand, right? He needs to get that taken care of, right? If I walked in here and I had a cut on my hand and there was blood coming out, people would be like, you need to get that taken care of.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody would call 911. But if I walked in here and I had a cut on my heart, would you see that? Would people know that? And so it's much harder to identify. And we need to make sure the resources are readily available. And we do everything we can to make sure that individuals who have that cut on their heart, who feel like they've been stabbed or hurt deep down inside, have places to go and know that there's a loving, supporting network to make sure that there's a better way.
How is the state working to make sure mental health support reaches underserved communities like rural towns or communities of color?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's so challenging. First of all, because even with physical health care, right? When you have the cut on the hand, there's all sorts of research that shows around the country and in Delaware, it's much easier to get high quality, affordable care in wealthier places, in wealthier neighborhoods than in poorer neighborhoods. And that's even more true with mental health, with healthcare that you cannot see. So we're making sure that the funding I mentioned, that over $8 million, is particularly focused towards going to educational institutions, to public schools in underserved areas that often don't have the access to the mental health care they need. And we'll continue to do that through our Department of Health and Social Services, making sure that as we spend our mental health dollars, we're addressing the inequities that not only exist today, but have existed actually for generations in the provision and providing mental health care assistance and support to Delawareans.
How can we better equip educators and youth leaders to recognize and respond to signs of distress in students, especially in, like you mentioned, men's mental health and boys who tend to mask their emotions? How can we sort of equip educators to address that?
Yeah. There's one thing we haven't talked much about, and that's stigma, right? That's stigma. In certain communities, and certainly in many school communities, and in certain genders, a lot of boys feel a lot less comfortable raising their hand and saying, I have a mental health problem that needs to be addressed. You don't hear that much. I'm having horrendous thoughts that I'd like to talk to someone about. Educators can play a critical role in making sure that, hey, you know, this is as bad as you having a cut on your hand. And if you don't get it taken care of, it will get infected. The bad situation will get worse unless we get you help. I think wellness centers in school is one step forward. I think something like the Cause Theater, where we are right now, is another step forward, where people in the Claymont neighborhood and potentially across the state and across the greater Philadelphia region in the Mid-Atlantic can look and say, look at this tremendous model for young people to work with other young people, to develop a supportive, positive network. There are so many negative influences on children and adults these days. To have a place like this outside of school that's just a positive, supportive place where people know, hey, whatever crisis I'm facing, I can come here. It's a great model. Quite frankly, in a busy schedule right now, it's a crazy time in government. If you can imagine what's going on the national level and trying to make sure that we don't lose millions of dollars here at the state. It's a busy time for me, but I said I need to come here and say thank you, Alena. Thank you to everyone at the Cause Theater who's doing amazing work like that cut to the heart that often is not seen. You're doing work to really address community issues in so many different ways. And one of those critical ways is addressing the epidemic of mental health among our young people.
Yeah. And I can especially relate as, I'm 19. I just got out of high school just a year ago. And in Gen Z, there's definitely an epidemic of loneliness and a need for this community. And so it is such an important facet of your administration to really put in that effort to focus on mental health.
Alena, why do you think there's an epidemic of loneliness, particularly in Gen Z.
I suppose like part of it has to do with, the accessibility of information. You can have a lot to find online and see all of the things you're essentially missing out on, because we're meant to grow up with a bubble of community and knowledge, and that's how things were back then. But being able to see a much larger amount of information can be extremely overwhelming. And even though social media is supposed to be social and media, it is highly like leaning towards the media and the consumption of information. And I think that, like, at least in my own experiences, the fear of missing out, and just sort of all of the things that is overstimulating about social media is really a very large effect on the youth. And that also does apply to adults, I would say, but I think especially with the younger students, we're still sort of figuring out how to navigate being new adults of people born in 2007, 2006. And there's just an overflow of information and mixed messages, and you're just consuming all of this negativity all of the time, and that makes you not want to reach out, and it's sort of like close in on yourself.
So social media is making people antisocial.
Yeah, ironically enough.
Yeah. Huh.
For if Delaware leads the nation in mental health in the next 5 years, what would that look like to you?
If we led the nation in mental health, the first thing I think of is, so 10 years ago, I was a 6th and 7th grade math teacher. I had a 6th grade student who, in terms of math ability, like God-given math ability, was one of the best young people I'd ever seen. The problem is there were deep-seated mental health and emotional issues. So it was a big behavioral problem, throwing chairs across the classroom, cursing out kids. But on those days where I could get this child to focus on math, it was so quick and easy to him. It was extraordinary. One day during class, there was a woman just standing in the hallway, looking through the window on the door of my classroom, and like I thought watching me, maybe like grading my teaching or something. I walked over, I invited her in. She said no. She just stood at the door, and so I kept teaching. And then I didn't see her again for 2 or 3 days, and then she came back and did the same thing. And then eventually I asked her, what are you doing here? And she said she was a mental health counselor working with this boy. And I started to notice, actually, the boy stopped acting out in class. And he was seeing this therapist. Her name was Mrs. Graves. I still remember it. The young man went on to graduate from our high school, got a scholarship to Sally's. He's like geniusly smart. But he had this emotional mental health issue that was holding him back. And I wonder how many kids in Delaware have that genius. Maybe it's not math. Maybe it is math, but maybe it's not math. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the arts. Maybe it's being a talk show personality in the Cause Theater, right? Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's art. Maybe they're a politician, but they're being held back by the chemistry inside them. Mrs. Graves, by the state investing in that resource, it unlocked the potential of this young person. And so I think that in every school across our state, there needs to be Mrs. Graves type people who can just provide a supportive environment. So then when teachers identify, hey, there's a problem here, when family members identify, hey, there's a problem here, there's a network of places to go. I feel like based on my personal experience with friends, there's so much untreated mental illness where there's stigma. So a lot of people who have mental health and emotional concerns that rise to the level where you really should be seeing a clinician, you should be seeing a professional, don't get the help they need. But even those who raise their hand and say, hey, I need help, we have a shortage of clinicians. We have a shortage of providers. So in 5 years, I hope we do a lot more to address those two problems. Number one, helping people to raise their hand without any stigma, any concern, saying, yeah, I have this problem and we need to address it head on. And they know they'll be greeted with love and a supportive environment, number one. And number two, making sure for those that do raise their hand, we have providers and the highest quality supports available right here in Delaware.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming and being on the show. That was our last question, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Alena. You're very talented. You have a very bright future. Congrats on your graduation from Mount Pleasant. And this is a fantastic cause here in the Cause Theater.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. De-Stress 302 is a Cause of the World production. This program was produced by members of the Cause production crew. Crew includes Milan Wood, Alana Hernandez. Associate producers are Adam Hubert and Alena Duggan. Produced by Matt Kelly. Our executive producers are Hayat Omar and Dennis Finicaro. This show was brought to you by the 988 Lifeline in Delaware and the Cause. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, alcohol or drug use, is in emotional distress, or just needs someone to talk to, contact 988. 988's trained, caring counselors are ready to listen. Call, text, or chat 988 for free and confidential support, 24/7, 365. You are not alone. Subscribe to De-Stress 302 today.